come with us on a musical journey through some of the most magnificent places on earth. Great towns and cities of Europe, steeped in history and beauty, and resounding with the stories and music of the world's great composers. Mozart, Bach, Beethoven, Grieg, Vivaldi, Tchaikovsky. Just some of the greats in our classical destinations. Hello, I'm Simon Callow, inviting you on a journey that leads through the lives and times of the great classical composers. We'll find out about the world that they knew and how it affected the wonderful music that they wrote. But first, Matt and Nikki in today's destination, Leipzig.
This episode will be continuing the story of Johann Sebastian Bach, the father of classical music.
As well as getting the inside story on music publishing in Beethoven's day.
Leipzig is in eastern Germany, not far from the borders of the Czech Republic and Poland. Tradition has it that the city was originally called Lipsk, which in the dialect of the Slavic settlers who first lived here means place of limes. Later on, we'll travel westwards from the place of limes to the beautiful valley of the Rhine and the capital of Rhineland, Mainz. Leipzig enjoys a wonderful heritage of gardens, promenades and squares. Much of the architecture dates from the 12th and 13th centuries, and there are plenty of examples of Renaissance architecture as well.
After Bach left Weimar, he moved north to Köthen, assuming the post of musical director in the Duke's court.
Bach described his 6 years at Köthen as the happiest of his life.
In 1723, his time was cut short at Köthen when the Duke's money was needed to support the Prussian military. But Bach was fortunate enough to secure a post here at St. Thomas's Church in Leipzig.
He was to be Kapellmeister, a role which, in effect, made him the music director of the whole city. St. Thomas's Church, or Thomaskirche, was founded in the year 1212. Originally built in a Romanesque style, it underwent a neo-Gothic transformation in the 19th century. Martin Luther preached here during the Reformation. Bach's duties, as well as being Kapellmeister, were as cantor of the church and leader of the Thomaner Chor, the boys' choir. The choir can still be heard singing cantatas or motets in St. Thomas's every Friday night or Saturday afternoon. Georg Christoph Biller is now the leader of the boys' choir and the cantor of St. Thomas's, only the 16th since Johann Sebastian Bach.
Across the square from St. Thomas's is the Bach Archive, and if you want to study Bach, this is the place to come.
The resources in the archive include a library with the most comprehensive Bach collection in the world, including original Bach manuscripts, and a museum focusing on Bach's life and work here in Leipzig. The Bach Archive also organizes events, including the annual Leipzig Bach Festival. Christoph Wolf is the archive's events director and has studied Bach's life here in Leipzig.
He is a very special composer. I'm a music historian, so he is not the only composer I'm interested in. But since he has had such an impact on the generations following him, and since he also, in a remarkable way, summed up everything that had been important in music prior to Bach's arrival, it's a culmination point in the history of music, and it gives you an outlook both back to the Middle Ages and basically up to the present day, because he is involved in everything that stands for quality and depth and expression. So he is the ultimate measuring stick.
Today we rightly judge the St. Matthew Passion of Bach to be one of the summits not just of choral music or of the music of the period or even of music, but of all Western art. Our reverence is not simply a reflection of the sublime subject matter, the trial, crucifixion, and death of Jesus Christ as related by the evangelist. It's in the organization and development by Bach of his material in a complex and mighty architectural span which encompasses first the narration and dramatization of the great story, second the response of the congregation to it, and thirdly the healing balm of the great chorales. Bach generates a movement within it of ever-increasing and cumulative power. It's great music, it's great drama, great feeling. The work is simply monumental. But we shouldn't imagine that the world came to that conclusion straight away. There were only 3 performances in Bach's lifetime. Then it vanished into posterity's equivalent of the bottom drawer. Along with much of the rest of Bach's music, he wrote, we think, as many as 5 passions, but only 2 of them have survived. Posterity, you see, simply wasn't on the agenda in those days. There were no recordings, no radio stations. Music served its purpose, had its day, then effectively vanished. In the case of the St. Matthew Passion, vanished for nearly a century. It took a young man from a Jewish family to rediscover it and revive the interest in Bach's music with a performance of the St. Matthew Passion nearly 80 years after he died. Mendelssohn was the young man's name. We'll hear more about him later.
Dominating the market square, the old town hall in Leipzig was built in 1556 and is considered one of Germany's most beautiful Renaissance buildings.
In the old days, on the balcony under the clock, pipers would pipe to announce various events. Nowadays it houses the City History Museum. It is still impressive. Yet when the new town hall was built in 1905, its predecessor was only saved from demolition by a single majority vote in the City Council. The museum houses a rich collection, including the Bach Room, full of memorabilia.
This is the very contract Bach signed when he came to work for the city.
The St. Nicholas Church, founded in 1165, was situated on the intersection of important trade routes from the 4 main points of the compass. This determined the church's dedication to Nicholas, the medieval patron saint of merchants and wholesalers. Since 1982, the members of this ancient church have held regular Monday night peace prayer meetings. In October 1989, these meetings were the spearhead of peaceful mass demonstrations, a vital part of the movement towards German reunification. Bach was responsible for the direction of music in St. Nicholas's, in fact for all 4 churches in Leipzig at the time. His day-to-day workload was enormous.
Well, it was a very tight week as far as we can tell. So he performed a cantata on Sunday in 2 churches, in the morning in St. Thomas and in the afternoon at St. Nicholas's, and vice versa the next Sunday. And he, as far as we can tell, probably started working on next Sunday's cantata on Sunday afternoon. On Monday and Tuesday he was hard at work composing the piece for the next Sunday, and he generally started with the more difficult movements in order to have some rehearsal time towards the end of the week. Then his students had to copy out the performing parts, so the choir parts and the orchestra parts had to be copied out. So usually they were not done with this until Thursday or even Friday, which meant that the more difficult, challenging parts could be rehearsed for by the soloists, maybe on Friday afternoon, Friday evening. Saturday was available, but then the premiere performance had to take place on Sunday. So the week was cut out for the composer and everyone else.
But somehow he also turned out an almost unimaginable number of compositions. 4 passion settings, a number of oratorios, nearly 300 sacred cantatas, his collection The Art of Fugue, and the Mass in B minor. This was the Protestant work ethic at its most remarkable. Bach died in 1750 and was buried in an unmarked grave here in Old St. John's Cemetery in Leipzig. When Mendelssohn came to Leipzig nearly 80 years later, he was appalled that his hero had nothing by way of a memorial. At his instigation, a statue was installed in 1843. The monument that now stands outside the St. Thomas's South Portal by sculptor Karl Zeffner was unveiled in 1908. Bach stands nearly 2.5 meters tall. In 1950, Bach's remains were found and interred here in the chancel of St. Thomas, where Bach was cantor for 27 years.
Of course, one of those most immediately influenced by Bach was his son, Johann Christian. And tonight at the Leipzig Opera House, we're privileged to see his opera, Themistocles, one of the featured performances in this year's Bach Festival. It's been said that Bach was the father of classical music, but what was it that made him so influential? Well, a large part of that answer lies in a collection of musical works which he began in Köthen, but finished here in Leipzig.
The Well-Tempered Clavier is a 2-volume set of preludes and fugues for each of the 12 major and minor keys. They demonstrated the possibility of using all the keys with the novel new tempered tuning of the clavier. But it would seem that Bach's main intention with these volumes was to teach. And that is exactly what he achieved. The Well-Tempered Clavier has become known as the Old Testament of classical piano music. One of Mozart's pupils, Thomas Attwood, claimed that a copy of the Well-Tempered Clavier was always open on Mozart's piano.
Felix Jakob Ludwig Mendelssohn Bartholdy, who lived in this house, was born nearly 60 years after Bach died. But in 1829, at the age of 20, he conducted Bach's St. Matthew's Passion. The audience response was overwhelming, stimulating a revival of popular interest in the music of Bach.
Born in Hamburg in 1809 to a family of wealthy, art-loving intellectuals, Mendelssohn was an astonishing musical prodigy. After a number of years travelling and conducting, he became the very first modern conductor of the Gewandhaus Orchestra and music organizer in Leipzig in 1835. He introduced the conductor's baton and the routine of regular rehearsal schedules to orchestral life. The Gewandhaus is the main concert hall in Leipzig. The new Gewandhaus was completed in 1981 and as far as classical performances are concerned, has some of the finest acoustics in Europe. It is a featured concert hall for the annual Bach Festival.
Gewandhaus means house of cloth because the original orchestra, which started in 1743, first met where the fabric markets were held.
During his time in Leipzig, Mendelssohn became a friend and patron of fellow composer Robert Schumann. He conducted Schumann's first two symphonies and his piano concerto at the Gewandhaus.
This classical facade is certainly one of the older examples of its type in Leipzig, but the building is far more famous because of two people who shared a first-floor apartment here.
We are happier now than I could have believed possible. I feel such sorrow for those who have never felt this. They are living a partial existence. The words of Clara Schumann, who, along with her husband Robert, were one of the great love stories of classical music. The blend of their gifts and abilities, along with their love, made for a potent partnership.
The house at that time had two grand pianos, which would have made for some great parties. The guests included their good friend Mendelssohn, French composer Hector Berlioz, Danish poet and author Hans Christian Andersen, Richard Wagner, and composer and pianist Franz Liszt.
Liszt said of the Schumanns, "I cannot conceive of a happier, more harmonious pairing in the musical world than that of the creator or composer representing an idea and the virtuoso enabling the practical realization of it."
Clara was, however, a little impatient with Liszt and wrote, "On Friday we hosted a modest soiree for a selected few. Liszt came, as always, very late. He seems to enjoy making people wait, which I find irritating. But in truth, we've grown very fond of him, and he's never been anything but friendship itself towards us."
While the atmosphere was convivial at home, Schumann went out for coffee, and this is where he came. Zum Arabische Kaffeebaum, one of the oldest continuously trading restaurants and coffee houses in Europe. Over the years, everyone came here. Bach, Wagner, Goethe, Grieg, and this was Schumann's regular corner.
Leipzig was also the city in which the composer Felix Mendelssohn spent the last 12 years of a short life before his death at the age of 38. By way of compensation, it has to be said that his early musical achievements are among the most remarkable in the history of music. Some of his best-known works were composed when he was in his mid-teens, including a dazzling and technically brilliant octet for 8 string players, but perhaps most remarkable of all, the orchestral overture to A Midsummer Night's Dream, in which the 17-year-old boy miraculously captures all of the magic, the nocturnal mystery, the boisterous comedy, and the playful, supernatural goings-on of the original play. How did the boy do it? At a stroke, he proved himself not only to be a great composer, but also a great literary critic. He was, as it happens, exceptionally well-read and versed in English literature, and we loved him. The city of Mainz was founded in the year 15 BC, where the Main River meets the Rhine. It's the capital of Rhineland-Palatinate, a major port and center for wine. Manufacturing is also big here. Chemicals, machinery, precision instruments, and something that is pertinent to our musical pilgrimage, printed materials. The Mainz Cathedral, or Dome, was begun in the year 975, but that's not the one you see here. The original cathedral burned down on the day of its inauguration in the year 1009. This, therefore, is the replacement, dating from before the 14th century. There's also a significant piece of history just across the road from the cathedral. The Gutenberg Museum celebrates the life and work of the man without whom reading a bestseller or even a newspaper would not have been possible. Johannes Gutenberg was born here in Mainz in about 1398, the first fuzzy detail in a life whose day-to-day progress is almost unknown to us. Printing of sorts had already been around for a couple of hundred years in Europe, but Gutenberg's big idea was to reduce text to its individual components: letters, numbers, and punctuation marks. He also wanted a process that would enable these elements to be mass-produced, the texts themselves to be reproduced perfectly, and all the elements to be reusable. Looking at the press, the results Gutenberg achieved are remarkable. The 42-line Bible was printed between 1452 and 1455, the first printed material that has survived.
In 1770, the year Beethoven was born, the Schott Musikverlag, or music publishing house, was founded here in Mainz. In fact, this whole building is under a preservation order because it's the same historic site the company started in all those years ago.
So what's so special about a music publisher? Well, Schott is loaded with history and links to Mozart, Beethoven, Wagner and Rossini, not to mention modern composers such as Schoenberg and Stravinsky.
This room is called Wagnersaal, or Wagner's Hall, after another famous Schott composer, Richard Wagner. In this room, Wagner read the libretto of his new opera, The Master Singers of Nuremberg, to the publisher and several other employees. It's also where he signed the publishing contract for his famous Ring cycle. Dr. Christiane Krautscheid is an executive at Schott Musikverlag.
Wagner always had very nice ideas of how to get even more and more money. One summer he was living in the house of the Schott family on the other side of the Rhine. He was working there. Every evening he ferried across the river, and one morning he came back to Franz Schott, that is the grandson of the founder Bernhard Schott, and told him, "Well, I'm sorry, but the money you gave me is gone." Franz Schott asked him, "Well, where is it? What have you been doing?" And Wagner answered, "Well, the gold coins have fallen into the Rhine when I was crossing it." So this is the reason why this very famous opera was then called Das Rheingold.
It's a great story, but this place seems to be full of great stories. For instance, it must have been quite a process to publish a symphony for an entire orchestra in the 18th and 19th centuries. The process started with the original manuscript. Let's take Beethoven's Ninth. Here it is just as Schott first received it. Messy character Beethoven, always changing his mind. You can see his corrections. To begin, a copyist would make a clean version by transcribing Beethoven's notation into something more legible. Back it would go to Herr Beethoven for approval and the odd last change. Once he gave his Ja, it was handed on to a team of engravers, anything up to 12 of them at a time. Using these tools, and ensconced in the brightest rooms in the building so that they could see properly in that often dim European light, the engravers would do just that, carve the notation into metal plates in a mirror image of the score as written. A mistake, or even a slip, and the plate would have to be thrown away to start again. Slow and painstaking, this process, sometimes days for a single page. Now, imagine a Wagner opera, for which over 20,000 pages were required for full score and orchestra parts. You know, sometimes it's a relief to be alive in the present day. Schott's success and the city of Mainz are closely linked. Without the rich musical and artistic heritage encouraged by the Dukes of Mainz, Schott's quick rise to the top would have been unthinkable. Although the dukes in various regions could at times be obstinate and downright obstructive, there were many who actively encouraged music and the arts.
That's the end of today's journey. Our next classical destination takes us to what is perhaps the very heart of the world of classical music, home to Mozart, Beethoven, Johann Strauss II during the greatest years of their creativity, the beautiful city of Vienna. So we'll hear their stories and, of course, their music. So it's goodbye from Matt And Nikki, and from me, Simon Callow. See you then.